appreciate you being here today. And so with that, we are going to, I'll share my screen again, Mitch.
Okay, just share the results of that one. Looks
Okay.
like most folks are statewide, 40%, with a pretty even distribution through the rest. Yeah, so we got folks from everywhere. It's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen again. And we should be at a slide that says, why is OHCS engaging? We good on that? Okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, well, with this, we're very excited and grateful that Director Bell was able to join us today. So we'll start with sharing a little bit about why we're engaging in this process, why we're engaging now, and then from here we'll launch into the presentation shortly after we hear from Director Bell. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Director Bell.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kim. Well, good morning, everybody. Andrea Bell, she, her pronouns, your executive director here at OHCS. In case you couldn't tell, we are really excited to engage in this particular conversation this morning. I'll just start by saying I am, quite frankly, so grateful to be in your presence today. So grateful that you, all of you, were able to and chose to make the time to really engage in what I think will be the start of a really series of important conversations about our way forward together. I want to take just a couple minutes to really just ground truth us in sort of the why behind why we asked for some of your time together. So we're coming off of the heels over the last few years where the state, we, each of you collectively, we have been able to together achieve a level of historic production progress. So many of you may know, for those of you that don't know, that prior to 2019, we set out with some very clear and specific production goals that we set out to achieve together. The first one was to increase the supply of permanent supportive housing by over 1,000, and to date, together, we surpassed that goal. We said we wanted to increase the production of rural housing development, and to date, together, we've been able to exceed that goal with over 4,000 units of rural housing being produced because of our work together. And then from a statewide perspective, we had wanted to increase the production of affordable housing by a minimum of 25,000 units, and we have been able to do that together. That is not because of the state independently, that is because each of you and all of the folks on the ground grinding every single day, holding us accountable to this work. Now, that's historic and monumental progress that I certainly want to make time to just certainly extend our gratitude, extend the graciousness for all of the behind the scenes work that we often know takes place that we don't get to see and that sometimes may feel unappreciated, candidly. And so I want to just start by thanking all of you for all of that progress. And we also know that we are in a moment of criticality from perspective of the supply and demand of affordable housing and all of its shapes and sizes across the state for many of the folks that we serve, for many of the folks that you directly engage with. And I know you all know this far too well, that it is the reason for a lot of sleepless nights for a lot of folks, and a lot of reason for stress when people wake up in the morning is not knowing whether they are going to be able to get by. And candidly, as somebody that has been there, that grew up in a very working class family, to know what that stress is like every single day, know that it is untenable. And so we are at this moment of criticality where we certainly want to celebrate and acknowledge progress. We want to also acknowledge and understand the conditions and circumstances that have led to shared progress together. And we also want to do that in a way that acknowledges that we have a governor that is deeply engaged and committed to creating more housing, both affordable and market rate. I don't think that's a big surprise. So from our seat, we think that this is a really good time to be working in housing in all of its shapes and sizes. And so we can acknowledge all of the progress and also know there is a whole lot more for us to do together. Now, we came out of session with a historic scale of resources. So over $1.1 billion of housing investments. Again, work that we want to celebrate together, much of that achieved because each of you grinded, made your voice known, held us accountable, certainly engaged with the legislature and those that play a critical role in making those fund decisions. You all helped us get here. And now with over $1.1 billion in housing investments, we need to figure out how to make $1.1 billion worth of progress that can be seen and felt in the lives of the people that we serve. So whether you serve in or are representing one of Oregon's small towns and rural communities, coastal communities, whether you're in urban, suburban communities, this work together is only going to happen with the collective we. And we also want to make sure as a state agency, as a government agency, particularly, that we show up differently in how we engage and pursue progress together. And that's really the prism by which we come to you today. Inherently in receiving over $1.1 billion of housing investments, there is an inherent mandate, not an if, but a when and how that we shift and change business differently to be able to achieve progress in a way that hopefully gains more efficiency, that can help move things along a little quicker. I don't think most people think state government and think slick, quick, easy, efficient. And so we want to challenge some of those boundaries and see where we can show up differently, not only in words and aspirations, but operationally. We also want to make sure that in this work together, that we as a state agency, as partners in this together, that we are not deciding and defending decisions, but that we are coming open proactively with you to engage you in some critical both questions and opportunities for decision points, so that in that pursuit of progress, we have an opportunity to truly build something together in this. And in doing this, we also want to make sure that we don't repeat some of the historical wrongs that helped get us into this very issue. So by the prism in which we show up is not only a place of openness and proactivity and wanting to hear directly from you what your needs and expectations are, but we also want to make sure that we are continuing to center humanity, centering certainly our rural communities, center the needs of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, because we know when we do that, that's actually shared progress for everybody in doing that. So when we talk about housing, when we talk about building more affordable housing, this is in direct relationship to the health of the people that we serve, but also the health of our economies. Affordable housing production has a direct implicit role on the health of our economies. And so we want to make sure that we are having a more expansive view in our pursuit of progress. So in this today, we're really having an important conversation, a start of a conversation really about our NOFA process, so our Notice of Funding Availability. Over the years, as I look across the screen, there has been no shortage of feedback that we have received from many of you about areas of vulnerabilities, areas that have raised eyebrows at certain moments. Just what are you doing? You all missed the mark on this. And so we want to start the conversation today about where we can optimize and improve the NOFA process in effort to what has always been our shared and collective goal together, which is to build more quality housing that is sustainable, that is an asset to the community. And to do that, we also need to see where we can help make your jobs a little bit easier as well in this. And so what we ask of you, what I ask of you in this is to hold us able and capable through this process. Know that we are not holding anything too tight, which means we want to be able to hear real talk feedback about what are the opportunities that you see and where we need to be able to shift. The more detailed, the more specific that you can get, the better. And we're going to ask for a little bit of trust to just trust and engage in the fullness of the process. You will see that with each meeting, particularly this one today, we're going to ask for some feedback after today's time together to make sure that we are continuing to be fluid in receiving your feedback and making the most out of this time together, really by your definition. So We'll spend some time today really forecasting out the topics that we're going to engage in, so each of you can feel prepared to come to the next sets of conversations, knowing what the topics are, knowing what questions we're hoping to answer, and knowing that we wanted to really prioritize getting some detailed feedback so that we can begin to situate ourselves for shared progress. So with that, along the way, let us know what you need, and we will continue to make sure that we are centering, hearing from you all along the way. We are excited to engage in change. We are excited to have an opportunity to optimize for what's possible. And along the way today, certainly, if you need anything, let staff know, and we will be responsive to your needs. So again, thank you for making time out of your commitment-filled day to be here. It is not lost on us that it's a commitment, and we appreciate it and hopefully do right by you in this time today. So we'll yield back to staff, and then we'll dig in for the agenda today.
Thanks so much, Director Bell. Appreciate that. Yeah, so our time today is going to be similar in format and structure as the this engagement series progresses. So we will have a presentation right after I'm done with the agenda. Then we will have time for some clarifying questions before we move into breakout rooms, into smaller groups, and get your input about what you heard in the presentation and the overall engagement plan that we're proposing and planning for this fall. So that's a bit of what we're doing today, and really our objective is to provide an overview of the engagement plan, the process that we're going to be using, the timeline, and the outcomes that we hope to achieve with your help in this process. So with that, I'm still letting folks into the meeting. This is a large space, so we're grateful, as Director Bell said, for your time and attention and participation. I'm going to turn it over to Natasha Detweiler-Davy to launch us into the engagement plan presentation.
Great. Thank you, Kim. And so this is Natasha Detweiler-Davy. I'm the Director of Affordable Rental Housing here at Oregon Housing and Community Services. It's nice to be with everybody this morning, especially, and for those that are new to the space, welcome aboard. For those that have probably been in some of those thousands of meetings with me, welcome back. I'm glad to have you here. I think, as we are are putting together this engagement, I think I just want to take a couple minutes here to talk about both the, kind of all the information and learning that we are bringing already into these conversations. Our aim, as Director Bell indicated, and you all know, we know your plates are full. We know that there's a lot going on, and we really are trying to structure this so that we're building on all of the input received over the years of broad engagement efforts, individual project debriefs, individual conversations, and lessons learned as we've worked to take on new bodies of works and roles in this space. And so we're really trying to be mindful to the fact of all of the demands that are in front of you, so that we can be targeted, specific, and strategic as we're seeking your time, energy, and input into our process. And so that is our our guiding desire through this entire process, and is why we are kind of setting up this first kickoff space to really talk about what to expect. What does engagement look like, and to hear from you around what are the missed opportunities or missed conversations that we should be thinking about addressing as we do this work in whole. And so, I think aside from everybody's plates being full, we have some of these on the screen are some of the key considerations we already know that is going on in community. We financing affordable rental housing is complex. There's a lot of layering of resources. We currently manage upwards of 15 different development funding resources, from the 9% LIHTC program to 4%. LIFT, PSH, GHAP, HDGP, OAHTC, acronyms continue on, and navigating when we want to be using resources and what layering and situation is a hard process to orchestrate. And we also have kind of new situations of resource constraint where we haven't had a practice of having those. And so that dynamic, and in particular thinking of the PAB constraint, that is private activity bonds, which are necessary to create the 4% tax credit, as being constrained, and what does that do to the way that we need to operate our resources so that we can continue a pace of production to have impact in community, and really stewarding that limited resources as well as we can in leverage with the resources that we have. And then we are also, of course, aiming for at least 60 years affordability. We also want to continue to preserve our existing portfolio of housing. We have been navigating a really challenging time with volatile costs. And I say we, and I think it's all of you and us that have been navigating that, and the idea of having projects at risk that have been otherwise fully, we had thought had been fully funded, and how do we keep, again, that investment going and bringing units into community where they are really needed. We are also acutely aware that our funding timelines, when resources are offering, and what that review process looks like, how long it takes, has impacts that span many years around when you're able to deploy resources into get those, break ground, get units into community. And all of that is juxtaposed with the fact of the extreme need that we see across the state for housing, and production demands that we see, and really have an exciting opportunity with political will to try to address that need. And so bringing all of those different pieces into alignment. I'm not saying or anticipating that this exact reform or process is going to solve for all of the challenges that we have, but that we can be looking to gain some efficiency, gain some alignment in expediting and delivering housing and public resources into the community. And I think as OHCS, from our perspective, really wanting to dig into and align with promising best practices and innovative strategies to maximize impact of resource investment. And so with all of that said, I think also want to just affirm a commitment to ongoing process improvement and an iterative process where we can continue to engage, accept feedback as we begin putting new pieces into place. And so I think then we can go to the next slide. Our goal, our goal for all of this engagement is for our future funding opportunities to be centralized, have a centralized application process. As I mentioned, we have upwards of 15 different resources. We have NOFA. We've been in a place where, initially it was a few NOFAs a year, and now we have grown to, in some cases, seemingly nearly a dozen different things opening. I will say that it is obviously, from an internal perspective, that's a lot of process to be replicating, but I also have heard, understand, and believe that from the development perspective, that is a really hard place to navigate. So how, understanding when, how you want to be able to, what is the right fit for your project, and does that timing happen to actually align with what your needs are for your own project, and when your critical benchmarks really look like. So wanting to bring all of our resources through a centralized application so that kind of takes away some of that burden of the process navigation. We want to be looking toward funding projects closer to being shovel ready. And that is because we want to make sure that budgets are sufficient. Right now, we are funding projects pretty early in the readiness process. And so, a year, 2 years after that process, when it's ready to actually close and move into construction, we're finding that there are gaps, and then there's kind of an urgent need to reevaluate and identify if there's more resources. And candidly, we don't have a lot of resources left to solve those gaps at that point, because we've committed all of the resources at that point. And so moving that kind of dial back a little bit to say, let's have more of that readiness accomplished before our final funding commitment, so that we have better clarity and certainty that that project is sufficiently resourced to move forward and be resilient through not only construction, but operations. And I think the balance to that is that we have an opportunity to stand up now a new legislative investment in pre-development activities. And so that is will be, to help kind of sustain organizations that need resources to take on that early due diligence before that final funding award. And then lastly is to, streamline our policy objectives and set asides and funding awards, as I referenced again, from dozens of fund offerings and different NOFAs that are kind of directed at different policy objectives, bringing those all under one umbrella. And keeping racial justice at the core of that work, and then strategically driving to outcomes, the foundation of alignment to serving community and having outcomes and impact community, especially as we are considering needs of BIPOC populations, needs to be at the core of all of the work that we do. And that will, I think, be better accomplished and be simpler to navigate, again, through a centralized application process. So I think with that in mind, I think maybe we can just go to the next slide, which is just a really high level overview of what our kind of look at what the development timeline is for a kind of state of where we are right now with our NOFA process and current readiness. In the place where we have some really just early project concept and feasibility work that happens before our funding application and then closing. And I think, so we'll try to do, as we go through engagement, try to keep kind of checking back in on this high level overview to see where is it that we can build or change, shift the places of our offerings, where can we be shifting or providing additional resources to make that clear connection and expedite kind of moving from concept through into construction more broadly. And really build this out to help navigate through all of the conversations that we'll be having. Next slide, Kim. So this is the engagement calendar, which I think we have sent out in our technical advisory, and we'll walk through the website that is going to hold all of this information in just a couple minutes. So each of these are really structured to have topic or related set of topics that are being tackled and accomplished within each, I guess, every other week, the cadence of these this engagement. And our objective is to gain your insight and perspective on the topics from to inform the development of our funding frameworks. And that's where we establish what are I guess from a funding framework, what are the set asides that we're going to be impacting into this? What are the subsidy limits associated with building with a preservation investment or a PSH unit or a veterans or rural? I think, getting really your broad input to be able to inform recommendations that we want to be making about those funding caps. And then also, as we are looking to set up additional new processes around pre-development, around the centralized application process, what is it that you need to be accomplished through that so that we can be responsive as we formulate final strategies? So going into each of these conversations, we will be essentially queuing up key questions that we will, be laying the groundwork with you. In addition to these broad, big engagement conversations, which are the really foundation of this work, we will be also having other focus group conversations, specifically looking to have one with other public funders in a month or so, are looking to have some deliberate conversations with housing authorities and, you know, other related, and lenders, other folks and stakeholder groups that have really a direct role in executing affordable housing across the state, but might not be in these conversations, or this kind of framework level is a different component of it. So, but it will be bringing all of that information back into the space. And I think I'm seeing some of the chats come in about like how is this going to work? When do I give my input? And I think we can kind of move to the next slide with the thought that what we're trying to accomplish here, right at this moment, is to build understanding about what to expect as you are coming into this space, and how to make sure that you are, again, prepared to be able to provide that surgical, the precision of impact of your comments, so that you're not being asked to provide the same thing over and over again, but you can really dedicate your energy where you best prioritize it. And this is our kickoff engagement, and we're trying to establish that cadence here. So our meetings are every other Thursday. On the Monday of that week, the week that they will go out, we will be sending out a technical advisory that includes the meeting materials, or link to the meeting materials. And those meeting materials will be providing the overview of all of the work that of kind of the basically what the topic is, kind of unpacking the topic. We have work groups internally within the division doing a lot of work and preparing, really digging into each of the different topic areas. It depends on what they are, how that conversation is orchestrated, but we're really focusing that on developing an overview. I'd call it a one-pager, but these are complex, so they're more than one page usually. But the background foundation materials. So I think, you know, one of our next conversations is around readiness. So let's provide kind of background information around that. What are the key questions that we have to be able to inform decisions around that, with the idea that, you know, as you go through your week before you come to this meeting on that Thursday, you would have had, you know, you could build in some time in your schedules to review that material and be thinking ahead of time about those key questions that we are raising for you. When you come to the meeting, again, with that discussion document, we'll be going through a presentation, an overview of the materials, try to unpack things a little bit further. And we will then go into kind of digging into questions. Often we will be using this breakout room structure to be able to either have really focused topical questions and also have a smaller group discussion, so that we have a better opportunity to hear more voices. And so that'll shift a tiny bit how that looks, given what the topics are, how many different things we're trying to accomplish in a meeting. But expect that there would be both that, the prep material sent out to you, cover it in a brief presentation, and then really dig into the conversation and input directly. We will be also using our easy retro board, which you'll get to see a little bit later this morning, but a web page where you can be putting in your comments, thoughts, whether you're live in the meeting or not. And so that is something that will be available to whomever it has input into each of those caveats. And then we'll be synthesizing that information back and providing information out by topic. There will also be a survey that comes out. So we'll be kind of hitting different ways of giving input. And I think, welcome to give input to each, the live conversation, survey, and retroboard, or you could pick what works best for you and dedicate your energy towards the one. I think really fundamentally, we will value input in each of those places the same. So if you feel like you have included it in a detailed retro board note that it reflects your opinion, you don't need to feel compelled to also do it in the others unless you really desire. So it's really your choice what gets how many of those different means that you want to be participating in. But I think we wanted to make sure that we're providing a diverse set of tools there. As noted in here, we will be recording these presentations. So if you are not able to attend in live time, you can, we'll be posting that on our website so you can catch up later. And again, retro board and survey tools will be available outside even of this active conversation space. And then, all of that information will be incorporated back, and then we'll synthesize the feedback received and provide copy of that on our website. And so our website will really become a depository of the current status of each of the conversations, and then the follow through space for that. I think we'll be using our technical advisories to send out those early meeting materials every other Monday. I think we'll also likely use, this registrant email list to be able to provide just direct feedback to those that were in the conversation. And so, I think with that in mind, if you, just register as you go, and then you'll be on all of the different email lists. But everything will be updated and as up to date as possible on our website. And I think with that, yeah, you want to, Kim, can I hand it off to you to go through the web page?
Sure, yeah. So I'm going to share my screen and just kind of show you where it is so that you know where to find all the content. So here is the landing page for the engagement. And you have a recap of why we're doing this and why we need your input and how it will work. And then we have the schedule for each of the meetings on the throughout the series. And it will have, after the meeting, we will post the materials within this line for each meeting. So you'll be able to reference the materials after the meeting. And then, as Natasha said, we will send out the technical advisory the Monday before the meeting with the new topic and the new meeting materials. So for example, on the 31st, which is our meeting on readiness to proceed, on that Monday, you will get a technical advisory and it will alert you to the materials being posted here on this website. So you can come and take a look at the discussion document, which will have the questions that we will be asking you to provide input on. So you can prepare for that session on Thursday, the 31st. So that is where the landing page is and where the materials will be. And I think with that, we might be ready to take some questions. Yeah, so we are, we got some questions in the chat and in the Q&A already, but if you would please raise your hand if you have some additional questions. I'll try to start a queue and we can answer some clarifying questions here before we move into the smaller groups, which are optional, by the way. So if you don't have any input to provide us on the engagement, you can feel free to drop off after the presentation or give us your feedback in the Easy Retro board. But right now we'll make a little space here for any clarifying questions you have, and then we'll move into optional small groups. So we got a question from Brandon. Will there be increased pre-dev support to get projects to shovel ready?
Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to find my mute. Yeah, so the pre-development, we had a legislative investment of $9.7 million to support pre-development needs. And so part of these conversations, and I think that happens on the September 14th meeting, will be focused on how do we, on pre-development and how that works, how that should work, how we need to think about aligning that to need, especially in response to the impact of the moving, presumably the readiness expectations higher before we are building that final commitment. And the readiness conversation will be happening on August 31st.
All right, we have a question from Shelley Cullen about rural development and the process there. I think it's linked also to readiness, but Natasha, if you are able to take that or punt it to a future meeting.
Yeah, I think it's a terrific flag. Thank you so much, Shelley. I think as we are pulling together other local funders, we also need to think about other federal funders. And so absolutely we'll be engaging with them to bring them up to speed on our process, updates, needs, and get some thoughts and action going with them around how we are working in alignment and to support rural development, leverage, and investment. Absolutely. Thank you.
Natasha, this is Shelley. Just as a follow-up, one of the things that, you know, we understand RD's timeline, and we always kind of put a cushion in there, especially when we're looking at a bond sale. But we have been very adamant with RD. So if you could possibly reinforce this, which I think you need to, is when there's a bond sale date, that can't move.
Yeah.
Because it could, you know, move us 2, 3, 6 months out. A 9%, we have a little more flexibility to move a week or days. But, you know, we've been pretty adamant with RD. And so they've been meeting those timelines in the past. But if you could just reinforce, those calendar dates are set almost a year in advance, and or at least 6, 7 months in advance now. So, you know, we really have to meet those dates. And we, as a developer, when we submit our application, we always try to put like a 30-day cushion in when we are doing our timeline with you all. So
yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially as we are trying to be you know, moving from a space where we had a lot more flexibility about private activity bond availability, really needing to make sure that we're maximizing the deployment of that. That will increasingly, I think, be a critical piece of participation from RD. So yeah, I will I've added that to my list. Thank you.
Thank you. And Travis Phillips in the question, but more of a statement about pre-development and important for BIPOC, small and rural organizations. And, you know, definitely linked to the readiness conversation as well. So Natasha, is there anything that you have in response to that?
Absolutely. I think, you know, let's see, the impact of both, you know, having our final funding being locked down later, I think, you know, it is the most concerning for those organizations that have lesser resources or are navigating lots of different pressures. And I think culturally specific BIPOC organizations, as well as small organizations, nonprofits, seem to be likely the most impacted by that shift. And I think we are really interested in aligning to addressing that, and also in fostering those businesses doing critical work with community to make sure that you are able to expedite delivery of housing and really able to build the portfolio. So that will, I think you'll see in the pre-development conversation that will be a continued theme, and appreciate it.
All right, thank you for that, Natasha. Anyone who has other clarifying questions or considerations that they want to share in the large group format before we move into smaller groups? Give a second here. Don't be shy. Okay. Well, I think that with that, we'll go ahead and I'm going to post this easy retro link in the chat as well. And, you know, as I mentioned, we're opening up some optional spaces for folks who want to weigh in on this engagement plan and the process in a smaller group format. You can join us in the breakout spaces here in a minute, or you can go ahead and take the link to this Easy Retro and provide us feedback after. I'm just going to share my screen really quick to show you for those who might be new to this particular tool. For each of the questions that we're looking for your input, we have a column here. And so you click on the plus button and you can type in, your response to that question. And, we're using this tool as a way to capture your input. There will not be meeting notes from these sessions. The input is collected in this tool. So we want to make sure that y'all know how to use it and access it. It will, as Natasha mentioned, it will be available on our website. And for those who have to watch a recording, if they're not able to join live, they can still provide input through this Easy Retro, as well as a survey that we'll be sending out after each meeting. So we also have a column for other here, which is in case you have something that doesn't directly address these 3 questions here, create kind of a parking lot for things that we may or may not be able to address within this engagement process, but important to understand your concerns and things that you're bringing into this space as well. So that is the Easy Retro board that you will all have access to either in the breakout space or on your own time to really think about the presentation and how you can best engage in this process and share that information with us as we consider the forthcoming engagement series throughout the fall. So I think with that, recognizing that some of you may not be joining us in breakout rooms, I want to just quickly share our next steps as a reminder. We will be having materials that are sent out on the week of the Monday of August 31st. The topic is readiness to proceed. Meeting materials will be posted here on our website. And this is a reminder of the calendar that we've already discussed. So with that, oh, got another question from Shelley. And then I do see Lisa in the chat as well. Go ahead,
yeah, I have a question. I didn't see anywhere where you're taking, questions or comments in regards to just commenting on items from previous processes and applications, so we can talk about, challenges with like communities of color, culturally specific versus culturally responsive. And then I had another thing that sort of came up that was interesting is you have a pre-application process, which we appreciate because it lets us know kind of what the competition is. But in the last Lyft transaction, there was a project that submitted a pre-application, and we want to look to see what our competition is, and they changed their site when they actually applied. And I guess I would challenge you to maybe not let people change their site once they submit a pre-application, so we understand what our competition is. So I just wondered if there's going to be a place for us to comment about application items.
Yeah, I that's a great flag, Shelley. I'm wondering, I think it's likely in the I think the dynamics, what's included in funding processes will be covered in the funding framework conversations.
Oh, okay.
And I think, and whether, and what resources will, competitive resources and processes that guide all of that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great. Thanks.
absolutely. I see Steph's hand as well, Kim.
Yeah, and Lisa in the chat asks, how will that information be shared about all the input you receive? So the idea is that we will receive the input and the Easy Retro board, as well as the survey that will be sent out after each topic meeting, and will provide a synthesis of the input received for that particular topic area. So for example, after this meeting, we will review the retro board, the comments in the chat, the discussion live that we've had, and create a synthesis of this meeting and the input that we received on the engagement process. And that will be posted on our website. So with each meeting on the website, you will see a synthesis associated with that topic that captures the input that we received through those different tools. All right, Steph.
Hi there. I don't know if it's for this particular kind of general, but I had heard about the timing for the private activity bonds versus, the subsidy funding coming through LIFT. Seems backwards. It sounds like you're going to release the private activity bonds first, and then LIFT will be next year. And I just wonder how that works, because you're going to want to see readiness, I suspect. And normally you want to come in for your private activity bonds with your subsidy. So I'm just wondering how, and easier would be to pair them both together at the same time and release it together so you can show a whole deal. Because it's kind of like, what do they say? What is it, the chicken before the egg or something like that. It's a little backwards, but I just wasn't sure if you guys have addressed that or you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I think I can talk a little bit about that, Steph. I agree. Ideally, we would be offering resources to be paired directly with PAB and to program the 2024 calendar. The problem is that there are already dozens of projects that have their gap financing from either prior LIFT rounds or Metro Bond or Portland Bond, like all of those other projects that already are ready to go with private activity bonds. And so that is already fully subscribing or will be fully subscribing the private activity bonds for the rest of this calendar year. And we expect and see projects that already have complete balance sources and uses to be able to move forward to close in 2024. And so I think that is our somewhat of an existential crisis. So how do we actually put projects that are ready to be able to add into the private activity bond pipeline when that pipeline, we're still at this place where there's too many projects that had been queued up to use that resource already in hand. And so I think part of, again, what the input we need to figure out is how do we do that structure and align the offering of tax credits into this centralized application process. I think that might also be, and also how does that impact the way that we're using 9% tax credits? What are other funding resources that might help be leverage, even if they don't generate a tax credit? I think we've talked a lot around bond recycling, 501c3 bonds. Are there other types of indentures that we should be looking at issuing to provide other resources to be leveraged with our gap financing to make projects viable? And then where do we need to prioritize more acutely the use of that 4% tax credit? So it's balancing all of those. But I think, that exact dynamic that you are seeing and expressing is because of the oversubscription and the over-reliance on that 4% tax credit for all of these investments.
Okay.
All right, thanks for that response, Natasha. And we do have a note in the chat from Stephen that wants to discuss this further or in the breakout rooms. And I'll just say that this is not a topic that we're going to discuss today in the breakout rooms. So Natasha, can you kind of clarify when we'll be discussing the pipeline in further detail?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, Stephen, on the what aspect of the current pipeline you're wanting to talk about? If it's a broad check-in on what that 4% process and priorities are, or if you're wanting to understand the performance of our current pipeline. projects. So I think we can probably provide information to both of those, and then I think figure out how we are structuring that in. But I think it'll go back to the idea of funding frameworks as the main umbrella for that, for identifying how we are leveraging and aligning timelines.
Okay, so the funding frameworks, topic
Yeah.
meetings, okay. Great, thank you. And then Travis asked, can you clarify what overlay there is between this engagement and a funding calendar for current biennium resources? Does this entire process precede the funding calendar? This is really important for planning purposes, including readiness.
Yeah. So we are currently programming calendars for 2024 and 2025. Although our legislature works on a fiscal year process, our funding calendars work on a calendar year process. So all of the offerings that are on our 2023 calendar are still going to happen. And so I think those are right now, our home ARP resources are out. Our 9% tax credit, which was moved back to back to the last quarter. I think it'll open by early September, if not a little bit earlier. And that will really be how we round out the year. So those are the offerings that are currently still at play, in addition to the small project and veterans offering that is wrapping up. So it will not impact 2023 calendar. That is still in existence. It is really the 2024 and 2025 that we are looking at with this biennials investment.
And sorry, Natasha, just to clarify, so if what I'm interpreting from what you're saying is that the 2024 and 2025 calendar and resource planning, you will not be proposing any dates for that or finalizing that information until after you've gone through this engagement process.
True. Yeah. So I think and this is same for our traditional cadence. We come out of legislative session in July, spend several months programming and doing the calendar offering. And we'll finalize that by the end of the year. That will be going through based on being kind of the foundation set through this engagement, and then we'll be finalizing it with Housing Stability Council. I think that's one piece that we haven't actually mentioned is that we will begin doing monthly regular updates with Housing Stability Council to keep them aligned, engaged, and get their input considered as well. And then as we are having kind of final recommendations on different topic areas, the first might be pre-development. We'll be bringing those frameworks to Housing Stability Council to approve, and then it would all essentially culminate in a calendar, which gives you anticipated timing for each of those offerings.
So is it fair to say that the 24-25 funding we'd be unlikely to see funding solicitations prior to spring based on the need for all of those processes to play out?
I'm not super comfortable pinning on a timing. I think we are I mean, I think, I don't think it'll be January 1. I think it'll take a little while to get things into position. This is not because we have because of the movement in the 9% tax credit use, we used 1 year allocation of that to pull some projects out of the 4% pipeline. The offering that is coming out in the next month or so for 9% and that NOFA is actually pulling one earlier. And so we won't have a 9% round in 2024 because we will have already used that resource. And so, anyway, so that starts kind of whittling down the execution of those. But I think early resource deployment in my, I think, again, we need to define all of this, but I think that, if we can get pre-development stood up to be able to provide resources to get projects to get to that readiness, I think whenever resources are ready to be deployed, the readier projects will be prioritized. And so I think that is in terms of thinking about bringing projects into a place where they would be able to move forward. I think focusing on readiness is the best strategy, and I don't think that these are going to be broad resource offerings right as the year starts.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. All right, Steph, I see your hand up again, and I'm not sure if we want to maybe if there are some real technical questions, Natasha, we can always take those one-on-one or try to find a time in this meeting series to tackle this. But Steph, go ahead if you have another clarifying question.
Yeah. So this subsidy round that's coming out in 2024, I guess, really wouldn't close until 2025. You would go back in for private activity bonds at the next cycle, which I assume is like next, end of 2024. Is that kind of the idea for the lift? I guess it's lift funding. That's the subsidy round. Is that, I mean, or are they, because, if the private activity round is really for projects that are fully subsidized, right? What you're essentially saying is this next subsidy round that you're having is for deals that don't have their private activity bonds, don't have their credits, they're just getting their subsidy. They get their subsidy, hopefully they get pre-development money so they can continue to perfect that deal to get ready for the private activity bond round. I ask this because, for a developer predictability, and this is where Travis is asking these questions too. Well, in our mind, we're like, okay, are we locking up sites? Are we not locking up sites for next year? And how long do we need to? Because it's really hard when you're doing site acquisition to be in a PSA and not know when you can go hard on the deposit. Then when you do that, is either you have pre-development funding, some subsidy, and you're pretty sure that you're looking good for a private activity bond. It's just a different world that we're living in than say years ago. And so that's why we're asking these kind of critical things, because we're all in our head, like, how do we actually time this out to work with our negotiations and our PSAs, and what is the expectation for readiness at the lift level, at the subsidy level versus the private activity bond level? Is there a difference?
Yeah, I guess, is there a difference? I don't know that there's a difference. I think that I don't think that we will. I mean, I think that there's a lot to still solve for. I think, I have thoughts on strategies that might work here, but I think I expect that we would be putting resources to projects initially that are not using 4% and private activity bonds. So projects that are showing that they are ready and that they can move forward with the resources that we have to offer to close in 2024. And I know that that is not going to be every project. And I also think we need to be pulling all of our creative energy together to say, what are other strategies that we can put together to help be able to still do larger scale development in an environment where we can't leverage, all of these resources with 4% tax credits. So I think, and that is where we are building into our process in this calendar, the cadence of offerings, and how do we align that with firming up commitments to private activity bonds. I think ideally we are giving you both in one. Right now they're separated because our process hasn't been focused on readiness on the gap funding side. And now I think we need to focus both of those lanes of resources on readiness. And so I think it will shift. I think a true statement, unless I see Tayu on the screen, but I think a true statement in my perspective is that we do not have new private activity bonds to put to new pipeline projects for 2024, because we'll be doing this, because there are so many right now that are already sitting on full funding, otherwise just missing that private activity bond. And I also think you're right that the process, having that be two different steps of process is not as clear as we would want it to be, and it is not giving developers as much guidance around when you can have surety about moving forward, because
Yeah.
really again, that resource demand for the PAB is just so significant.
Right.
Yeah.
Reading kind of the tea leaves, what it sounds like is you're oversubscribed, you're getting the backlog caught up with this session of private activity bonds. The next round of quote unquote lift funding is going to be kind of, without tax credits, without private activity bonds. And then when you go to do 2025, you're probably going to align your PABs with your lift to do a one and done. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but you're going to try to get caught up to make the process more synergistic, we'll say, so you don't have this kind of lopsided, spread out funding and tax credit event. Does that sound?
I think that sounds right. And I think, again, like there's so many details of that to work out. And I do really think we need everybody's perspective and needs kind of reflected into that. So I think, but yes, I think ideally we want to have certainty that we can move a project forward. So we'll, still have I think we've done in our kind of evolution of the 4% and PAB to kind of focus on readiness. I think we're now trying to bring all of our resources more into that lane, and feeling like that will let us have a more efficient process. And, again, wanting to pursue creative solutions, to make sure that we can still keep volume moving. But I think, yes, to the idea that we have to right now kind of catch up to where we are. I'm still going to keep my breath held for the 25% test shift and all of those things that could change things on a dime. But I think we have to all just be really acutely aware that there is no easy access to PAB at this point in time, because the applications are just so substantial for those. And I think we really need to be, dedicating that to getting into community as soon as they are ready to do so. And I think once we get a centralized application together where we are able to kind of, have
roll it out,
all of the resources together to make a project work. I think hopefully also for those that are doing gap only transactions, providing alignment with our resources. I think oftentimes we see projects come in and then they really would love resources from 2 different or 3 different NOFAs. And so this is a way and a mechanism to say, let's put those all into under one umbrella. Let's figure out what our direction or needs are. Is it PSH? Does it combine PSH with new units or PSH with rehab units? Is it a small project, a large project, and really embrace all of that together to hopefully still keep things moving. But for those that are really just strategically focused on the 4% program and the Lift 4 projects, I think it is not going. I don't think it is feasible that we will be doing an offering that is going to be closing in 2024 for those, because I believe that will be in pretty quick turn, seeing that we have applications from projects that are already moving to be able to use all of the available volume cap from what we anticipate in 2024.
And I guess we have parameters on the lift only kind of funding round of like scale and all of that.
Yeah.
I imagine if it's just a slug of money and no tax credits, that's going to be, for some of these deals that are bigger, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard to put that much, direct subsidy into it, I think. And that's where I think, as we are, really looking at things like the bond recycling or 501c3 bonds or elderly and disabled resources, and like all across, again, other creative strategies say, tell us that too. I think trying to figure out how, in a world where we were doing a tax exempt bond issuance by virtue of a 501c3 bond, what does that do in terms of the per unit subsidy needs, and where do we really land that, to understand what size and scale of project would be feasible.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Natasha, for sharing all of that. And so I think we do have a question in the chat, but Mitch is going to respond to Lisa about when we can expect to discuss that topic. Again, we'll be moving into breakout rooms here to talk specifically about the engagement timeline. And the process that we've laid out, the topics that we're covering, and get your recommendations, understand how you can contribute to this process as well, if you're open to sticking around for breakout rooms. Before we do that, actually, I wanted to share some process agreements that we're going to be bringing into this space. OHCS staff and leadership have been participating in the Center for Equity and Inclusion training. And so we're bringing these process agreements into our workspaces and to hold ourselves accountable to fostering an inclusive environment and addressing white supremacy culture that dominates our workplace and the spaces where we interact. And so we're incorporating these and practicing these agreements. And so we're bringing these forward to consider practicing with you as we move through this engagement process. Again, with really the goal to help foster an inclusive environment. And so I'll just talk really quickly about kind of these process agreements, and then we'll move into breakout spaces. And if you have thoughts or questions about these process agreements, we can discuss those in breakout rooms or share those on the Easy Retro. But thinking about engagement and staying engaged, as Natasha said, you have our full attention in this process. So our staff are definitely engaged. I don't think that staying engaged will be an issue for the participants in this meeting and in this process, but following along with the process, staying with us as we move through topics and as we synthesize the learning. We are hoping that you'll stay engaged with us through this meeting series and continue to contribute. Speak your truth responsibly is really important for us as we try to allow voices that maybe are not typically forthcoming in meetings or maybe underrepresented in meetings, but being mindful of how much we're contributing and balance with other participants as well and their viewpoints. So these are some things that we're, again, bringing into our workspace and listening to understand, being willing to do things differently and experience discomfort. Certainly, we, as has been mentioned, that's what this is about, is being willing to do things differently and kind of acknowledging that we may experience some discomfort with some of the input that we receive from you, but we're committed to doing things differently and being open-minded to how we can collectively make improvements and make changes that will ultimately benefit the work that we all collectively do. I think the hardest one for me here is expect and accept non-closure. I know personally for me, having the patience, again, to trust the process and, to maybe understand that I may not hear the answer that I want to hear in the moment that I want to hear it, but that I'm willing to be patient and willing to stay engaged and come back. And our commitment is really to address all of your input. So please, be aware that that is our commitment to you, is to keep you informed about how your input is being used to make decisions. And so our responsibility is to be communicating with you. And if we're not doing that, please, we want to hear from you. As our goal really is a transparent, inclusive process. And but there may be times when we adjourn and there's some non-closure to specific topics. But as we practice this together, we hopefully will be able to, set efficient meetings and efficient outcomes to this process. So thanks for